What if I told you that the single most defining characteristic of Gandalf's mission, the absolute core of his purpose as decreed by the gods of his world, was a prohibition, a rule, a fundamental constraint placed upon him before he ever set foot in Middle-earth? Gandalf was arguably the most powerful benevolent being walking the continent during the War of the Ring. And he was specifically forbidden from using that power to win. He was not sent to defeat Sauron. Let me say that again, because it changes everything. His mission was never to confront the Dark Lord in a duel of light and shadow and emerge victorious. To do so would have been to fail utterly and completely in his task. This isn't some minor piece of trivia for the hardcore fans. This is the hidden engine of the entire story. It is the source of his struggle, the reason for his methods, the explanation for his triumphs, and the tragic, beautiful secret behind his very nature. The story we think we know is about a wizard who saves the world. The real story is about a being of immense power who saves the world by refusing to do so. It's about the terrifying, world-breaking danger of a hero who decides to win at any cost. To understand Gandalf, we have to first understand the one thing he feared more than any Balrog, more than any Nazgul, more than Sauron himself. He feared the temptation of his own strength. So, why would the Valar, the angelic guardians of the world, send their greatest weapon into the heart of a war and command him not to fire? What were they so afraid of? To find the answer, we have to go back, not just a few years, but centuries. We have to look at the world before Gandalf. The Grey was even a whisper, a world sick with a quiet, creeping despair. The Third Age of Middle-earth was not an age of open warfare, not at first. It was an age of slow decay, of fading light. The great alliances of the past were fractured memories. The elves, the firstborn, were diminishing, their hearts turned towards the sea, towards the undying lands they longed for. Their magic was fading from the forests, their cities becoming echoes of former glory. Rivendell and Lothlorien were beautiful, isolated pockets of preservation, museums of a time that was passing away, not engines of a future yet to be built. The dwarves, industrious and proud, were largely concerned with their own halls, delving for treasure and nursing ancient grudges. They had suffered greatly, driven from their ancestral home in Moria by a nameless terror, their great kingdoms of the north laid waste by dragons. They were a people turned inward, hoarding what they had left. And man, the race of men, destined to inherit the world, was adrift. The northern kingdom of Arnor had long since collapsed into ruin, its people scattered into a few wandering rangers, keepers of a memory few others cared to remember. In the south, the great kingdom of Gondor, the last bastion of Númenórean strength, was in a state of elegant, protracted decline. Its kings had failed. The throne sat empty, the kingdom ruled by a line of stewards who did their best to hold back the tide, but it was a battle of attrition they were slowly, inevitably losing. Their watchfires were burning low, their enemies were gathering. They were holding the line, but they had forgotten what they were fighting for. This was the true sickness of Middle-earth, a loss of hope, a failure of nerve, a slow, collective forgetting of the strength they possessed. Sauron's greatest weapon in these early days wasn't his armies of orcs. It was this creeping despair. He fostered it, nurtured it. He was a shadow in the east, a whisper of fear, a necromancer in a fortress called Dol Guldur in southern Mirkwood. He was a poison seeping into the soil of the world, making things grow crooked. He didn't need to conquer the world with force, not yet. The cure was almost as devastating as the disease. They learned that direct, overwhelming divine power is a blunt instrument. It doesn't just remove the cancer, it destroys the patient. It also creates a crippling dependency. If the gods always come down from the mountain to solve your problems, you never learn to solve them yourselves. You become a child, forever waiting for a parent to save you. And the Valar wanted the peoples of Middle-earth, elves, men, even dwarves, to grow up, to find their own strength, to make their own choices, to win their own future. So they chose a different path, a subtler path. They would not send an army. They would not send gods in their full, terrible glory. They would send messengers, emissaries, advisors, catalysts. They would send 5 of their own order, the Maiar, lesser angelic spirits of immense power, but they would be sent under a strict set of rules. They were to be clothed in the flesh of men, to feel the weariness of the world, its pains and its fears. They would appear as old men, venerable and wise, to be trusted and listened to, but not worshipped. They were to be vulnerable. They could feel pain. They could die. And most importantly, they were forbidden from revealing their true power to dominate the wills of others. They were not to match Sauron's power with their own. They were not to become rival Dark Lords, even in the name of good. They were to guide, to counsel, to inspire, to kindle the flames of courage in the hearts of the free peoples. They were to help the inhabitants of Middle-earth save themselves. This was the mission of the Istari, whom men would call the wizards. And when they arrived on the shores of Middle-earth, around the year 1000 of the Third Age, they came quietly, without fanfare. The chief of their order was Saruman, the most powerful, clad in white. There was Radagast in brown, and 2 others in blue who journeyed into the east and were lost to the histories of the west. And then there was the last one, the quietest one, the one who seemed the least of them all, clad in grey. His name among the elves was Mithrandir, the Grey Pilgrim. We know him as Gandalf. And as he stepped ashore, Círdan the shipwright, one of the oldest and wisest beings in Middle-earth, saw something in him that the others did not. He saw a hidden strength, a depth of spirit, and secretly he gave Gandalf his own ring of power, Narya, the Ring of Fire. Its purpose was not to dominate, but to rekindle hearts in a world that grows chill. Círdan knew. The mission wasn't about power, it was about heart. This is the core of it all, the absolute non-negotiable directive that governed every action Gandalf ever took. Tolkien laid it out explicitly in his letters and other writings. He described the Istari's mission as being to train, advise, instruct, arouse the hearts and minds of those threatened by Sauron to a resistance with their own strengths. They were forbidden from a direct exhibition of power. They were forbidden from seeking to dominate elves or men by force and fear. Think about what that means. It's a mission of profound, almost painful restraint. The Valar essentially sent a team of Special Forces operatives into a war zone and told them their only weapons were conversation, encouragement, and hope. They had the power to level mountains, yet they were tasked with acting as therapists, teachers, and community organizers. This rule wasn't arbitrary. It stemmed from the Valar's deep, tragic understanding of power itself. They knew that the desire to do good, when coupled with overwhelming power, is one of the most dangerous forces in the universe. It is a straight, wide, and beautifully paved road to hell. The logic is so seductive. If only people would listen to me, I could fix everything. I know better. I see the bigger picture. For their own good, I must force them to do what is right. This is the logic of tyranny. It is the logic of Sauron. Sauron, in his original form, did not begin as a monster obsessed with destruction. He was a Maya, of the same order as Gandalf. He was a servant of Aule, the great craftsman of the Valar. He prized order, efficiency, and coordination. He looked at the messy, chaotic, and often foolish world and believed he could fix it. He wanted to organize it for its own good, but to do that, he needed control. He needed to dominate the wills of others to make them follow his perfect plan. And so he fell. His desire to impose his will for the greater good became an end in itself. He became the very thing he may have initially sought to conquer, chaos, but of a darker, more centralized kind. The Valar knew this danger intimately. Gandalf's power was not meant to be a sword to slay the dragon, but a light in the dark that showed others where to strike. So, how does a being of immense power operate under such constraints? You do it by becoming a wanderer, a meddler, a disturber of the peace. Gandalf spent centuries walking the roads of Middle-earth. He didn't build a fortress or gather an army. He built relationships. He learned the languages and customs of all the free peoples. He drank wine with elves in Rivendell, smoked pipeweed with hobbits in the Shire, and consulted the dusty lore of men in the libraries of Minas Tirith. He was a living thread connecting the disparate, isolated cultures of the world. His primary method was conversation. A word here, a question there, a nudge in the right direction. He didn't command Thorin Oakenshield to reclaim his homeland from a dragon. He simply arranged a tea party with a very unlikely burglar, planting an idea and letting it grow on its own. He didn't order Frodo Baggins to take the ring to Rivendell. He sat with him by the fire, explained the danger, and allowed Frodo to make the choice himself. His entire strategy was based on empowering others. He was the ultimate mentor. Think of his relationship with Aragorn. He knew from the beginning that Aragorn was the heir of Isildur, the rightful king of Gondor. A lesser being, a more impatient one, might have dragged Aragorn to Minas Tirith, presented his credentials, and demanded the people accept him as their king. He could have used his power to awe them into submission. But that would have made Aragorn a puppet king, propped up by a wizard's power. It would not have been real. Instead, Gandalf guided him, advised him, and most importantly, let him walk his own path of doubt and exile until he was ready to claim his own birthright. Gandalf's job was to help Aragorn become a king, not to install him as one. This is in stark contrast to the chief of his order, Saruman. The White grew impatient with this slow, subtle method. He saw the growing power of Sauron and believed their mission was failing. He saw the weakness and division of the free peoples and lost faith in them. He came to believe that the only way to defeat power was with greater power. He began to resent the restrictions placed upon him. In his pride, he thought he knew better than the Valar. He started to believe that the end, the defeat of Sauron, justified any means. So he built his own fortress at Isengard. He gathered his own army. He began to study the arts of the enemy to better understand and counter him. But in doing so, he became like the enemy. He sought to dominate, to control. He tried to force the world into a shape of his own design. When Gandalf came to him for counsel, Saruman revealed his true colors. He urged Gandalf to join him, to seize the ring for themselves, to use its power to depose Sauron and establish a new, wiser order. Saruman's fall wasn't a simple turn from good to evil. It was a philosophical betrayal of the mission. He abandoned the role of gardener and tried to become the architect. And in that moment, Gandalf faced the ultimate test. He could have joined Saruman. The logic was powerful. But he refused. Because he understood, in a way Saruman no longer could, that the mission was not the goal. The method was the mission. How you win is more important than if you win. Saruman's fall wasn't just a plot point. It was the ultimate cautionary tale, the living embodiment of everything the Valar feared. His journey from the wisest of the Istari to a petty tyrant is a masterclass in how the pursuit of a noble goal can corrupt absolutely. Saruman didn't wake up one day and decide to be evil. His descent was gradual, paved with the flagstones of impatience and intellectual pride. He looked at the state of Middle-earth, at the bickering dwarves, the fading elves, and the foolish, short-sighted men, and he despaired. He saw them as children squabbling while their house was on fire. His core belief became, these people are not capable of saving themselves. Therefore, I must save them, even from themselves. This is the great temptation of the wise, the belief that your wisdom grants you the right to make decisions for others. He began to see the Valar's restrictions not as a profound moral principle, but as a foolish strategic blunder. Why whisper when you can command? Why persuade when you can compel? He saw Gandalf's wandering and meddling as inefficient, a waste of time. He chose the path of industry, of central planning. He turned the beautiful valley of Isengard into a blasted landscape of forges and pits. He tore down living trees to fuel the fires of war. This is a powerful metaphor. He sacrificed the natural, organic world for the sake of manufactured, artificial power. He began breeding the Uruk-hai, a more perfect soldier, twisting and corrupting the races of orcs and men. He was mirroring Sauron's methods down to the last detail. He was no longer trying to inspire life. He was trying to manufacture victory. His great sin was the sin of impatience. He could not bear to wait for the slow, uncertain growth of courage in others. He wanted a guaranteed outcome, and the only way to guarantee an outcome is to control all the variables. That means controlling people. His use of the Palantir, the seeing stone, was the final nail in his coffin. He sought knowledge to gain an advantage, but in doing so, he opened a direct line of communication with Sauron himself. He thought he could contend with the Dark Lord, that his mind was strong enough to resist. But he underestimated Sauron's greatest power, not his armies, but his ability to corrupt, to find the cracks of pride and doubt in any heart and widen them into chasms. Sauron showed Saruman visions that played on his fears, making the might of Mordor seem invincible, making the resistance of the Free Peoples seem utterly futile. Sauron didn't need to dominate Saruman's mind. He just needed to convince him that his own path of cynical realpolitik was the only logical choice. Saruman became a rival, yes, but a lesser one, a puppet who didn't even realize his strings were being pulled. He was trapped in a web of his own making, a prisoner of his own supposed wisdom. This failure is what gives Gandalf's success its true weight. Gandalf saw the same world Saruman did. He saw the same flaws, the same weaknesses. He felt the same urgency. But he never lost faith. He never succumbed to the despair that says people are not worth saving on their own terms. We see this most clearly in his confrontation with the One Ring. When Frodo offers it to him in Bag End, his reaction is not one of cool dismissal. It is one of pure, visceral terror. He physically recoils. "Do not tempt me," he cries, "for I do not wish to become like the Dark Lord himself. Yet the way of the ring to my heart is by pity, pity for weakness and the desire of strength to do good." This is the key. He knows his own weakness is his own virtue. He would take the ring with the intention of using it for good. He would defeat Sauron, tear down the Tower of Barad-dûr, and then, what? He would have to use the ring's power to heal the world, to order it, to protect it. He would become a benevolent dictator, a kindly tyrant, and the world would be enslaved to his vision of good. He would become Saruman, but infinitely more powerful. He would become a new Dark Lord, and the cycle would begin again. His refusal of the ring is not just him being a good person. So when we think of that image, the one burned into our minds, Gandalf on the hilltop at dawn, a figure of blinding power, we can now see it in a new light. The light exploding behind him is not just his own. It is the reflected light of the courage he has so carefully kindled in others. He is not the sun. He is the dawn that promises the sun is coming. He is the hope that allows others to be heroic. The story of Gandalf is the story of the profound power of letting go. It is a testament to the idea that the greatest good you can do for others is not to solve their problems, but to convince them of their own power to solve them themselves. It's a quieter, more complicated, and infinitely more beautiful story than the one we thought we knew. It reminds us that the most important figures in our own histories are not always the ones on the throne or the ones leading the charge. Sometimes they are the quiet pilgrims, the gray wanderers, the ones who walk beside us for a time, and with a word, a look, or a simple act of faith help us to find our own way through the dark. They are the ones who know that you don't save the world with a thunderclap. You save it with a whisper that sparks a fire in someone else's heart.